Good morning. Today we look at 1 Corinthians 14, verses 1 through 20. And the end of chapter 13 was, now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love. And chapter 14 begins with the words, pursue love. And I thought about that, pursue love. We all want to be with someone. We want to have that feeling of importance to someone. We grow up, hopefully we grow up knowing the love of mom and dad, brothers and sisters, but pursue love. And you think about, what he said, love is patient, love is kind, and all of those descriptors that he used about love, and to pursue love, to not only have it for yourself, but to share it, and to know what love is. And to be loved is, it's pretty powerful to have someone care for you that way. But it's, but he's talking, again, in relationship to the community as well as individual, but, it's pursue love and strive for the spiritual gifts, especially that you may prophesy. And so it's, to pursue love, again, is, to try to do the best we can for God and to have God's love. And so this is very important, to know love and to be loved. And then he says to be, hope to prophesy. That's more important than speaking in tongues. And to prophesy means we speak for God. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're predicting the future, but to prophesy is to speak of God's love and of God's grace, and some prophecies, in the Old Testament prophecies and New Testament prophecy as well. The Old Testament talks about the coming of Jesus, the second coming of Jesus in the New Testament, and it's looking forward to something. And Paul says that to prophesy is, speaking for God that way is so much more important and beneficial than speaking in tongues. Because he says if you're speaking in tongues, maybe you're speaking to God, but it doesn't do any good for anybody else. It doesn't lift anybody up. It doesn't matter in anybody's life unless there's interpretation. And so it's all of those things tied together. He says in verse 3 that those who prophesy speak to other people for their upbuilding and encouragement and consolation. So upbuilding, encouragement, and consolation. So I thought about that too, to encouragement. We talk about God's love, God's grace, God's forgiveness, the promise that God doesn't hold anything against us. That's encouragement. Encouragement that we know that because we've sinned in the past and that we will sin in the future, that we are forgiven. The prophecy of consolation. And I think about that. Consolation. That's resolving issues of that make us sad, that are hurtful to us. And I think about that, especially at the time of a death of a loved one. And we've all experienced that. And so the consolation that we receive from the prophecy, from the speaking of God's word, is that we know that our loved ones continue to live in God's presence, that they have been raised from the dead, that, and we don't, I don't look at it as some future deal way off, who knows when, but that with Jesus' words, today you will be with me in paradise, remind me that this freedom from sin, freedom from oppression, freedom from all that life separates us from God. This life on this earth, we're not fully in God's presence. So the consolation of prophecy, of God's word, is that when we no longer live here, that we will be in God's presence. And not only that, but the memories of everything of this person whom we miss live on in us and through us. And so, to think about the prophecy, God's word is help in upbuilding, in encouragement. And I mean, I think of the upbuilding and encouragement as very similar, to, and I just thought maybe I should look at it as upbringing, but it's upbuilding, to give someone the confidence to go forward each and every day in life. And it just, I mean, this is what God's word does for us. And then, so he's talking about the importance of prophecy, the importance of hearing and speaking God's word. And we don't have to be highly educated people in biblical terms, highly educated in theology to speak God's word of love and of grace. We speak what it is that we know. And and so all of the spiritual training, that might be available isn't necessary. I mean, to sit with someone when they're sad or lonely or they're going through a hard time, to encourage them, to show them your love, to show them that you care. This is who we are, and this is what God would have us do. Verse 5, he says, I'd like to tell all of you to speak in tongues, but even more to prophesy. One who prophesies is greater than one who speaks in tongue, unless someone interprets, so the church can be built up. And so if someone can interpret the tongues so that the church will be built up, then tongues are okay. But still, prophecy is still speaking God's word, speaking God's truth, speaking of God's love and of God's grace is so much more important. In verse 6, he says, if I come to you speaking in tongues, how will I benefit you unless I speak to you in some revelation or knowledge? It's the same with lifeless instruments that produce sound, such as the flute and the harp or the bugle. If their sounds are muted, they're not fulfilling. And I thought about that, with I played the trumpet and a baritone, and they've got valves on them, and if you blow the horn, with the valves either open or closed, you're down, you get beautiful sound. Well, sometimes. But if you hold the valves partway down, you don't get that full sound. You get a kind of it's not music to the ears. And so we don't want to mute God's word is basically what it's saying here too, that, and so the when we come to want someone talking of God's love and of God's grace, don't cloud it, don't shroud it, don't hold it down with so many restrictions and everything, but it's a gift. It's there, it's free. We don't do anything to deserve it, and it's there, and to remind them of God's love and God's grace. In verse 9, he says, if in a tongue you utter speech that is not intelligible, how will anyone know what is being said? For you will be speaking into the air. And again, it's just, unless someone can interpret these unintelligible sounds, and this is, the sound of a trumpet or a flute or a lyre, if they're not clear, they're not pleasing, they're not doing what they should be doing. And so it's to speak God's word and to encourage others with God's word. Verse 13, he says, one who speaks in tongues should pray for the power to interpret. For if I pray in a tongue, my spirit prays, but my mind is unproductive. So even if you're speaking in tongues yourself, if you can't interpret it, if you can't understand it, you're not doing any good for your mind. And it's our mind that is one of the biggest controllers of our body. And it's our mind that helps us believe and trust in God. And so we need to train our minds and be able to hear and think and everything. The very last verse, he says, do not be children in your thinking, but be infants in evil, but in thinking be adults. I think that's, be infants in evil. Don't continue to practice evil. Don't let evil get a good hold on you. Don't let evil lead you down the wrong paths, but to be mature adults in our thinking about God.